Welcome everyone to the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. This one is presented by Arai. For 3 generations, Arai's been making some of the world's best helmets. And of course, Arai Helmets meets all safety standards. But they also pride themselves in a blend of engineering tech and human craftsmanship that makes an Arai helmet fit better and feel better, which also protects you better. Your head's worth the best. Visit AraiAmericas.com for more information on tech, fit, and paint jobs. Get yourself a paint job there. AraiAmericas.com, because you owe it to you. All right, so I'm Greg White, and on the other line is Jason Pridmore. Hello, Jason Pridmore. What's going on?
What's up, G-Dub? How are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. You slicing and dicing there in the yard, are you?
Yeah, I injured myself a little bit today. Cut myself wide open. Trimming hedges like an idiot. Yeah. What are you going to do? You know what I mean?
What are you going to do? You mean you're not making the big bucks? You can't just get somebody to come over and do your yard?
Well, actually, that was the motivation. I had
a guy get a little exercise.
No, I had. Well, of course, yeah. I had my guy show up and mow the lawn today. I kind of mow it myself. He mows it a little bit. So he came out with his crew. Got the yard nice, and then it was like, I got to trim some hedges here. So before the podcast, I ran out and delayed the podcast with the slicing of my hand. No big deal though. How's the ankle, pal? I heard you were on a golf course.
I was. Yeah, I was. I tried. I did play last week, which was good. Didn't think I could, because a couple of weeks ago I played like 4 holes and couldn't walk, and then I've just got this too good of an opportunity coming up at Laguna, so I'm trying to get out there. But I actually caddied for a friend of mine yesterday. She was trying to qualify for the U.S. Women's Amateur, and she did. She killed it, so that was good. But about the 14th, I had to walk. So I was on some meds just trying to see, because you know me, I don't take anything ever. And it worked till about the 15th hole. Ooh. So, and then, yeah, I've been a bit on the struggle bus today. So I'm laying a little bit low, and I leave tomorrow for the Ridge up in Washington. So going up there this weekend.
Do you want to comment, Jason, on all this stuff that's out on Facebook? People talking about, is MotoAmerica going to the Ridge? Do you have any insight from it? Listen to me. I can barely talk.
Inside info?
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any?
You cut into your brain a little bit this morning with those clippers, huh?
Don't tell anyone.
No, the Ridge is a cool place. It's one of those spots that not a lot of people know about. When I say that, obviously everybody knows about it, but nobody really goes there, especially, if you're not from Washington or Oregon. It's a cool place. So there are a few concerns I think that MotoAmerica is addressing, as is the track. They seem like they're working really well together. And about 2 years ago, I did a track inspection, kind of did the first starting track inspection, I guess you could say, with the powers that be up there, and reported back to a couple people from MotoAmerica. It would definitely be a neat track for us to go and race at. There's going to be some things that I know that they're changing with the track as well. So I'll get a little bit more of an update maybe for our podcast or whatever next week. So I'll have more information, but it's a great place, Greg. Yeah, it would look good on camera. I mean, you can see Mount St. Helens. So the place is pretty cool.
Yeah. I love the layout. And actually, Jay, for those that are in the know, since Mark Bothy listens to this podcast, a friend of ours,
yes,
I had the Strava lap record on a bicycle around that track for many, many, many months.
So there must not have been very many people pedaling.
No, and then Eric Bostrom showed up and shattered it. But Mark was the one, he told me around the whole track, and then we got to 100 yards from start finish line, and I just got up and sprinted. And he was like, "What are you doing? That Strava was mine." I go, "Nah, mine." So I had it for a while.
That's funny. Mm-hmm. That's so funny. Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, it's a track. You're on a bicycle. It's still about lap time. So good job, G-Dub. Could you do it now?
Well, it's got a good downhill run, and I rip down the hills. I mean, gravity's my boy when it's downhill. Not when it's, exactly. All right. Hey, by the way, everybody, little announcement, of course, if you haven't listened to the podcast last couple of weeks, JP and I are going to be doing a live video podcast for MotoAmerica /World Superbike at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. That'll be July 12th at 4:30 p.m. local time. It'll be broadcast on MotoAmerica Live Plus, the app. So go check that out. That's half off right now, by the way. I think it's like $39.99 for the rest of the year, and you get Saturdays and Sundays, almost nonstop coverage there.
It's so good. That's great that MotoAmerica did that as well.
Yeah. We'll post it up later on the Greg's Garage YouTube channel, and we'll strip the audio and post that up as well, so you can listen to it in the normal places that you do. All right, Jason, before we get into the MotoGP weekend, which was absolutely gnarly, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It was a crazy weekend. Little news flash, if you're listening to this when we first post it, JD Beach, rides for the Attack Performance Estenson Racing Yamaha R1 at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. He will be racing both MotoAmerica EBC Brakes Superbike class and World Superbike races as well. Now, Jay, I talked to both Richard Stamboli, the owner of that team, and obviously data guy and crew chief and all that, and I talked to JD Beach. And they tried this last year they tried it and did it with Josh Herron. And Josh, he finished one World Superbike race, but his back was hurting him and all that stuff. But this year's a little different because, number one, Richard has 2 motorcycles built, where if you remember last year, they just had one that was a complete build. So he'll actually be able to have a different bike for World Superbike and MotoAmerica. The specs are very similar in what they do, but different tires. So on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, so today this is the beginning of July. So in a week's time, they're going to go to Buttonwillow and they'll test. On Tuesday, they're going to test on Dunlop tires with the MotoAmerica bike, Jay, because they're working on what we've talked about in the broadcast, chatter problems. But on Wednesday, they're going to have the Pirelli tires that they're going to ride on all day long to get a test in, so JD can get a feel for them. Richard can utilize the data he had from last year's World Superbike and all that kind of stuff. So they're going to go into the weekend a little bit more prepared than he was last year. And obviously, JD Beach is in for it. So I just wanted to get your comments on that because it's, new information. We're talking about this, actually recording this Tuesday, posting on Wednesday, and the press release is going out tomorrow. So what do you think about JD's and Estenson Racing Attack Performance's effort about doing 4 races and crazy all those sessions? Which, by the way, if you've seen the schedule, are like back to back.
It's crazy, and really, it's 5 races, isn't it, Greg? Because World Superbike has added that sprint race now on Sunday morning.
That's right, Super Bowl.
So so it's like 5. It's 5 races. They got a great guy for the job. I think JD, fitness wise, that's never ever been in question. With JD, he is going to be up for the task as far as that goes. It's going to be grueling and hard, but I think he'll just kind of get on with it. He'll get on with it and do the best he can. I think having 2 bikes is a bit of an advantage over what they did last year with Josh, because they can set a bike up for the Pirellis, and it's not going to be a mad scramble between sessions for the crew to make whatever adjustments that they have to make there between the Dunlops and the Pirellis and things. And he's got 2 bikes at his disposal now to be able to kind of do that. It's going to be a good test weekend for JD as well. He'll get a lot of laps, so yeah. Richard will be able to throw a lot of different things at the bike. I like that. And to me, I feel that when you look at JD, he's so adaptable to so many things. But there's been some tracks this year where he's kind of gone really fast to start. Then he's had a couple of tracks where he's had some issues. Even like in Utah, we saw him tip off a couple times. So I'm not used to seeing that. So they're going to get a ton of laps around Laguna Seca, a track that I think will be good for testing. And it could help him for the rest of the year. So, and it's great to have a wild card that we can all kind of root for going up against the World Superbike guys.
And JD will be a guest on our MotoAmerica podcast from WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. So we'll be able to talk with him in more detail about how it all came about. But I will tell you this little story before we hear from JD in a couple of weeks is I said, when did this whole thing start? And he was like, well, we were at VIR and we were talking about it. And we both, Richard and JD, were like, we both said to each other, well, let's just go win a race first. Mm-hmm. And then he won the race at VIR. And they were like, yep. Uh-oh. And they really didn't bring it back up again until Utah. And that's when things really started to move forward. So, yeah, it's good. It's good and very interesting to see how this whole thing's going to pan out for JD. And you're right, 5 races, dude. He's in for it.
And it gives him, I think he's going to be really motivated to go race against those World Superbike guys as well. I think he's going to be just really pumped to get on the grid with them, see where he kind of stands, home race. I mean, being from Owensboro too, I know, we know Nikki and Raj and Tommy all did wild cards up there. And, so I like all that like connection. So it'll be good for him to, and he's not racing enough this year, what with dirt track and everything else. You might as well throw a couple.
Right.
Might as well throw some more in there, Well,
so, Jay, where does Laguna Seca measure in terms of, physicality of racetracks? I mean, for the 10 that we have here, if, where's obviously, what would you think? Barber is probably the most physically demanding, you think?
I think Sonoma, and it really depends on weather. It depends on the actual, like how hot it could be. Because we've been up there a couple times, Greg, haven't we, at Laguna, where it's been scorching, and it can definitely take it out of you. So I think that Laguna flows a little bit more than somewhere like Sonoma. I think Pittsburgh's probably a pretty physical track too. I've never raced there, but just from what I see, it seems pretty physical. But we're kind of in those summer months that we talk about where the heat can really play, zap you of your energy. So we'll see how that works. But the guy is a grinder. He trains so hard every day, and he's on the motocross bike. He's on the flat track. He's doing all of it. So I don't, and the weather that they have usually back in Owensboro at this time of year is pretty hot and humid. And those guys are putting on the grind, all the Owensboro boys. So I think that, but physicality wise, Lagunas can be pretty physical, especially over, I think that Superbikes do 26 laps around there, I believe it is. So the physical part's just going to be all the riding he's got to do.
Yeah.
It's good that they're getting to go test and such. So yeah, good luck to those guys. And I'm looking forward to talking to JD more about that. I didn't actually know about that until this morning when you mentioned it to me. So I think it's great.
All right, let's move on to MotoGP, Jason, because
let's do it.
Well, a lot of stuff happened. Let's go through the results first for the MotoGP class and the race results, because it was, drumroll please, Maverick Vinales, who ended up winning by 4.8 seconds over Marc Marquez, Fabio Quartararo, Andrea Dovizioso, Morbidelli in 5th, Petrucci in 6th, Cal Crutchlow 7th, Joan Mir, who actually led the race at one time for a few seconds. But he still led a race, his first MotoGP race that he led. Jack Miller in 9th, Andrea Iannone, Espargaro pole, Aleix in 12th, Miguel Oliveira in 13th, Pecco Bagnaia in 14th, and Hafid Sirene with the last point. Then you had Rabat and Abraham. Non-finishers in this one, Zarco, Nakagami Rossi, we'll talk about those two, and Rins. So, Jay, there's a whole host of things to talk about here. Where do you want to talk? Where do you want to start?
Well, I think you're right. There's a lot of things. I love where MotoGP is right now. I love the diversity of each week, seeing different people up front. I thought seeing Joan Mir kind of come to his own a little bit this weekend was a definite talking point. How many mistakes a year do we see Rins make? Like hardly any. And when I saw him qualify well, then get the start he got on the first lap, I was asked, like, who do I think is going to win the race? And right then I'm like, I'm going to take Rins because I just know that he can put down the laps, grind out the laps. So him making a mistake like that was a bit unusual, uncharacteristic. They were talking about possibly the wind because they were talking about how windy it was. I saw a couple comments from him saying it could have been the wind had something to do with that. You can't take it. You just can't say enough about Quartararo right now. Gets another pole. I think that would be my talking point, Greg, of the race, because Quartararo gets pole, leads a ton of laps. Everybody talked about the instability of the Yamaha, his specifically. Take zero away from Vinales. He rode amazing. He looked like the guy to beat the second that Rins went out. Like he just looked like he had pace. But Quartararo's bike, I think, doing what it was doing down the back straight there, I think was definitely the first talking point, because I feel Quartararo had the pace in him, and the Yamahas were so good in the last quarter of that racetrack that he might have been a hard guy to pass had he maybe not had the instability down the back straightaway.
I think if you really look at the overall picture, Quartararo was asking a lot of his arm pump, and he talked about it. He put ice on it, after he got done with that race. But Jay, have you ever suffered from arm pump before?
I have, and I know the reasons why I suffered through it. But when I was watching the race, and you got to understand, and I say this and I try to qualify this all the time, but I've never ridden at these guys' level, Greg. Okay, I mean, these bikes are so much different than anything I ever rode. But there was one thing that he was doing that I found really odd. When he would come out of the real tight left and then onto that back straightaway, there was a little kink to the right. And one of the things that if you watch Quartararo ride the Moto2 bike, he sits really, really far back on the seat, but in a different way than what we hear most people talking about sitting on the seat if you watch him. And when he was going through that kink, he had the bike leaned over a lot, where if you watch Marquez and you watch Vinales, their bikes were much more upright, kind of going towards the left edge of the track. And a lot of their turning came a little bit later. It wasn't as sharp as early. And how is that the point that I'm making is when they're going through that kink, he's going through the gears. The other two looked like they were already through those gears by the time they got to the edge of the track. And I said during the telecast, I'm like, he's got to change his line there. He's got to keep the bike more up on the meat of the tire rather than getting to the edge of the tire and using arms there. This is just my opinion, okay? Mm-hmm. And 2 days later, and I haven't even read it yet, but Quartararo actually came out and said, I should have changed my line there. And to be honest, Greg, I just haven't had time to read his reasoning behind it, but I'm wondering if it has something to do that, because if you watch, those guys always rushed up on him on the left-hand side. And the reason for that was going through that little kink, he was much more on the edge of the tire in a tuck position, going through the gears than the other two guys behind him. And I'd be interested to see if that was what he felt his problem could have been, Yeah. It was just too bad though, wasn't it? Because he's rode amazing. And do we still know if the stat of him not falling off this year is still valid? Is that still true?
I didn't hear him falling off in the last practices but that doesn't mean he hasn't. And I haven't
researched it. We haven't researched that, but yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I asked you if you, had arm pump, because I've suffered through arm pump just one weekend. It was at Laguna Seca. We raced there many years ago. And I remember that when you start to lose strength with arm pump, it kind of, I don't know, it doesn't double its problem, but it just keeps getting worse because
it makes you feel like a passenger, doesn't it?
Well, you got to hold on tighter. Control. You have to hold on tighter because you start to lose strength when you get arm pump, and that just compounds the problem. And I wonder if for Quartararo, that was part of the case. And because with tank slappers or that wiggle that you saw, a lot of times what's creating that, and I'm not saying it is, but this is just from past experience, is that, the bike's going to be squatting in a position you're talking about, Jason. It's leaned over, makes the front end light. And if you have a good grip on the bars, then you're going to cause it to, have that motion. It's part of the reason why stock street bikes, whatever it was 15 years ago, maybe started to come out with steering dampers, because people didn't understand that you should be more upfront, connected to the tank, takes the load off the shock a little bit, keeps the bike a little bit more balanced or whatever it is. But anyway, so yeah, I really think if you actually go back and watch that race as much as I have, you can see a lot of bikes getting upset, a lot of those motorcycles. Correct. And I think that you're looking at a function of the aerodynamics. We've talked about this in cycling for years. When you're a track cyclist, you run disc wheels, like it's a solid disc. And if you look at what Ducati's doing right now, they're trying to do the same thing. They are now coming out with these sheaths or whatever that go around the wheels. The problem with a disc wheel is if there's a crosswind, it's a nightmare. I mean, an absolute 100% nightmare.
Yeah, you're hosed.
Right. That's why you started to see in cycling deeper dish wheels. You see 35 millimeter wheels and 60 millimeter, because it was like, okay, we want to try to keep the aero properties of going straight through the wind without, disrupting as much of the handling characteristics or slowing the bike down because of a side wind. It's, it's one of those things. And if you looked at that race, you saw that none of the factory Ducatis had the sheath on the back wheel. They had taken those off. And I think
because they had them in practice, didn't they? Because I saw when Petrucci fell, he had one on there on the rear. And but you're right. Yeah. And their aerodynamics is such a big key. I think it's a bit of a mystery only because like when we looked at Melandri last year on the Ducati and even this year on the Yamaha, his bike's the only one that does it, right? Like literally. And then when you look at the Yamahas right now, Quattararo's bike's the only one that does it. So that we could see. I don't really remember seeing Morbidelli's bike moving and things. So it might be something just that they do a little bit different, maybe, Greg? I don't know.
I don't know. Vinales' bike definitely was doing it. It just wasn't as bad.
It wasn't as violent.
And the Suzukis a lot of that, though, doing it.
Once it starts, the problem is that once it starts, what I've always found is that, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, when you've come out of corners and you get the little head shakes, sometimes when we're trying to pull ourselves forward to get under the bubble while we're accelerating, you're fighting two things. You're trying to pull yourself forward, but all the weight of the motorcycle is going to the back. So if the forks extend and then it starts skimming over the top of any bumps, you start getting head shake. And the only way you really get rid of it is to load the front again. So that's why you see people roll the throttle off to try to load the bike again and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And when you look at how he rode, he looks to me personally, he looks so much better on a MotoGP bike than he did on the Moto2 bike. He looked awkward on the Moto2 bike. He looked different than anybody I'd ever seen, to be honest, the way he rode that bike. But when you're on something with as much horsepower as that, and when you're tipping it over to the right and you're maybe trying to pull yourself a little bit forward as you're on the gas, getting it onto a thinner part of the tire even, and those head shakes start, you gotta remember the forks are extended at that point. So the thing is shaking around like crazy. And so when you sit there and you look at that, I just felt like if he'd have ran it straighter through the kink instead of tipping it as much as he was, that could have been something that could have hopefully fixed it. But anyways,
he's a rookie.
The kid's amazing.
He's
unreal.
He's a rookie, right?
He's unreal. I never saw it coming. If you'd have told me between those two riders, between him and Morbidelli, I'd have said, oh, that's going to be Morbidelli setting poles and Morbidelli leading races in this and that. I mean, Quartararo has just been a breath of fresh air this year. Let's take nothing away from Vinales, by the way. We've seen him struggle pretty hard. Kind of the king of qualifying or the king of testing, right? I mean, the guy's always heading the timesheets, and it just seemed we've heard a lot of complaints about the Yamaha and how it doesn't accelerate and how it doesn't have much grip, and these guys are trying to ride it a certain way and they can't get the best out of it. And then I think that Quartararo and Morbidelli, and this will be for another question for you later on, but it almost seems like with the addition of Quartararo and with Morbidelli's pace, it'd be interesting to see if that team took that bike another direction and Vinales has applied some of that, Greg, because Rossi's still obviously struggling mightily with it, maybe being stubborn, maybe trying to find something that he wants to feel. But you have to think with the other three bikes, kind of, what do we have? We had three Yamahas in the top five, and they're all those three qualified on the front two rows as well. Maybe there's a direction change with this Petronas Yamaha that Vinales has adapted for him to look as good as he did on a full tank of fuel, qualifying and everything else. Those are where he's been struggling, and he looked really good at the beginning of this weekend.
Well, I know Vinales has a new crew chief for this year, and that was part of the whole issue, was going a different direction. Now, post-race, Jason, so Valentino Rossi and Takaaki Nakagami got into it. Valentino was making a pass up the inside of Nakagami. He lost the front. He collected both of them in a very fast section of the racetrack. Rossi crashed, gathered himself for a second, went over to Nakagami and did what Rossi does, concerned about the other rider. But post-race, sometime after the race, there was an interview with Valentino, and what was very interesting about this answers that Valentino had, Jason, was that he had said that they actually had found something in morning warmup, something for the long haul, something that's totally different. And he felt that he had the pace to be at the front coming from back. Remember, because he ended up going outside of track limits, which we're going to talk about at some point in this podcast about track limits. He went on the green part. And so on his fastest lap of qualifying, that didn't get him into the second qualifier. So he was stuck in that first qualifier. So he's back on the grid. But Rossi, for the first time since before testing, last year's, the testing, winter testing, was the most positive that I've heard him heading into Sachsenring this weekend, that they had found something. So I'm curious, the woman who was interviewing Valentino, I think it was the woman who was interviewing him, didn't really go like I would have said, what have you found? But I guess that's a question you can't ask a GP rider for some reason. But that's what I would have asked. Like, what is it that you found? And so maybe it's a combination of what Vinales has found, Petronas Yamaha has found. It's really hard to say. We know what they haven't found, which is a motor. It's the same motor. So if they're going to win more races, they've got to do it at these tracks that we're coming to in the next couple because of the characteristic of the racetrack. So
yeah, you're 100% right. And the Yamaha in sort of the last quarter of that lap where Vinales was so incredibly much faster than Marquez, that it almost seems to me like with the additional horsepower of the Honda, because I remember how fast Marquez has been in that section over the years. Maybe with the horsepower of the Honda, he wasn't getting the same handling through that area, and the Yamaha just looked visibly much more stable, much faster. It was it just looked like Maverick was on rails, and he just looked like it was so easy. So great to see Yamaha winning. Now we've got 3 different brands this year that have won races. Actually, we've got four different brands now, Greg, that have won races this year, because Yamaha, Suzuki, Ducati, and Honda have all won. So I think that what a great place to be in. I have to say that there is no rival. There is no rival, and I've said this a bunch on our podcast, that there's no rival right now with Marc Marquez. Yeah, sure, there might be the odd guy that steps up every week, but there's only one guy capable of being on the podium every single weekend, and that's Marc Marquez. And now the intelligence that he has, and this is why this weekend I actually thought about this. This could be the last couple of years where we've seen him, when he made his mistakes in 16 or 17, I can't remember which year it was, they kind of blend together for me. But the year he didn't win the championship, and he only didn't lose it by much, but he made a lot of crashes, a lot of mistakes. He said this weekend, he says, he goes, all I wanted to do was beat Rins and Dovey. Wherever they finished, I just wanted to beat him, because that just adds to his points. He's riding with such intelligence, and he's riding, I mean, he had so many big moments in qualifying again and so on. And it's like, but in the races, he's always in the top 3. He's genuinely looks happy to be in the top 3. And he's going to push whoever wins. He's going to push him to the point where he feels, okay, I can't push him anymore. I don't see the guy losing. I mean, Quartararo could be a guy that could step up, who already has, but I'm talking over the next 2 or 3 years. The guy who finished 4th in this race, Dovey, I don't think he's second in points, but he's not I don't think he's like really a big threat to Marquez. I think that they go to so many places where the Ducati is going to be strong again once we start going to Austria and some of those places that we know it'll be strong. But Marquez is going to have such a big lead by the time we get to some of these places. He might have a 2-race lead. The guy's he's too good. He's just too good.
I think even with the problems that Honda's having, I think anyway, that last little bit of the lap where the Yamaha was so much better, or you could say Vinales was so much better than Marquez, is that not a very front end reliant part of the racetrack? Like, you got to have a good feel on the front end to get through that section.
It's so fast. Yeah, I've raced there before, and that last bit of section, sort of 3 or 4 corners from the end, is the most physical part of any track I've ever raced on, because the speeds are so high and you're making a transition from right to left, and it's so physical through there. And the Yamaha, the left that Marquez was going underneath those guys, sort of 3 from the end, the real fast left, that is such a gnarly corner. And it's so hard because the gyros are spinning so fast that to get the change of direction to happen is so difficult. And he was so fast through there, but all the right-handers leading up to that, the Yamaha just looked incredible. But you got to, Greg, when you look at the Honda right now, it's a little bit like what Bautista has done in World Superbike, where, given Bautista the full props that he has, he's ridden that bike amazing, obviously, and done very well. I don't think it's the easiest bike to ride. So the fact that Bautista's done what he's done is even more incredible. But the same could be said for the Honda, because you look at like Crutchlow, he's always complaining about the bike. Nakagami showed definite signs of improvement, but you look at somebody like Lorenzo, I would say he's having a way worse first year on the Honda than he had on the Ducati. And the first year on the Ducati was horrendous. And I mean, and every time he tips off, he hurts himself. Every time.
That's
does Lorenzo.
I know.
And he's not even close to the pace, and he's getting hurt. That's what's crazy. So obviously the Honda's not an easy bike to ride. But Marquez, he sorts it out and figures it out and does what he has to do. He knows where the limits are of the bike, and does a good job. I mean, it's one of those things where I really feel like you could put Marquez on any one of the other 3 bikes that have won this year, and he'd win on those as well, obviously. So pretty incredible. I think a couple of mentions that you got to talk about. Paul Espargaro was basically, after the first session, they were talking about him not even being able to ride. He was in so much pain from his Barcelona testing crash. So not only does he beat all the KTMs, which I don't really think is that big of a deal anymore. We know how good he is, but he ends up 11th. But I mean, another guy who's just having a shocker is Zarco. Like, guy pulled in with arm pump. I mean, we saw what Quartararo rode with. And yeah, the motivation is going to be probably a lot higher than when you're running in the top 3 than when you're running in that 10th to 15th spot, like Zarco was. But he literally just plummeted down the field, like, what was it, Greg? Like 12 laps in or something like that. He just started going backwards.
Yeah.
And obviously there was a problem. And for it to be arm pump, those guys are fighting a lot. Did you see qualifying at all? Did you get to watch it at all?
No.
I know you were busy over the weekend. They did a short sequence of really, really good camera work, slow motion, and a tight left with Zarco. And the front end was almost coming off the ground. It had that much chatter. And he's trying to save it, and there's no way he can. It's literally in a slow corner, chattering its brains out, and he had zero chance of saving it. And when you wake up every morning knowing that you have to deal with that, how many rounds are they into it now, Greg? 9 rounds or something, 8 rounds. I don't even know what it is. 8 rounds probably. Man, it's got to be frustrating to wake up in the mornings and see that, and then you see what Quartararo and Morbidelli are doing on your old bikes. It's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, it's got to be a little take the punch out of the day, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And real quick, I think this is a good thing. You mentioned a couple talking points, I love, I think what a lot of our listeners don't know is you and I can literally get on the phone and talk about things for an hour. Just talking about stuff that we notice and we see, but this whole, track limits thing to me, there's not a rider out there. I can honestly say that I've never met a rider, and I'm thinking out loud here, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that have ever gone into a race thinking, ooh, there might be a couple places I can cut the track and it's going to make a difference for me. I get the track limits things, but when you look at how close the racing is this year in all the classes, and I'm talking World Superbike, I'm talking everywhere. Greg, have we seen a year where we've seen more multiple rider crashes, like 2 guys coming together, 3 guys coming together? I don't recall a year where I've seen more people coming together in crashes or accidents than 2019. Am I wrong or right on that?
No, I haven't done the research, but it feels like you're right. And it just seems like the racing's so close, not just up front, but all the way across the board, that you get put in those situations, right? Riders making
everyone's
moves
fighting for that same part of the tarmac, aren't they?
Yeah.
And this has got to be the 4th weekend in a row when you go back to Moto 2s and 3s and World Superbike, 4th or 5th weekend in a row. We've probably had, I'm not even going to say it's controversy because it wasn't. Rossi cleaned out Nakagami. And it sucks. It sucks. But when 2 guys are together and they're racing hard and you're riding at the absolute limit, it's not even about you're making a bad decision. It's about accidents can happen, and they do. And we saw it in the Moto 2 race where we saw a couple guys. Look at Baldassarri goes up underneath Alex Marquez. If you watch that video really closely, he's at full lean, just trying to cut the bike back a little bit, and there's a little movement in the suspension. It's enough to unweight the front end of the bike, cleans him and Marquez out. Both guys leading the championship. Now they're not, because Luthi is, but we saw it in World Superbike with Johnny Ray and Lowe's a few weeks back. But I can't honestly say I could point the finger at somebody and go, well, that was stupid. You can look at like Baldassarri and think, okay, he's crashed a bunch, but it's not the intention. I just think the racing's so close. And when I see everything's under investigation, I hate that scroll more than anything. I hate it. I just hate it. Everything's under investigation. What are you going to investigate? 2 guys racing hard against each other. That's it can happen. We're all wanting close racing. But I'm with you. When you brought that up to me earlier on today about the track limits thing, you got these Moto 3 guys, there's 20 of them going for the lead, and you're going to pick the one guy out who runs 2 feet off into this green area of the track, and you're going to give him a warning when you're not sitting right there behind him. You don't know if the guy in front could have checked up a little bit, missed a gear, done whatever it could be, and you might penalize a guy for exceeding track limits,
Yeah, I'm so on the fence about this issue, because it's like, okay, I get it. You're putting pavement down where there might be grass, so for safety reasons. But in the Moto 3 race, which we're still going to talk about Moto 2 and Moto 3, so I don't want to overdo this, but in the Moto 3 race, there were times in those final chicane, those final couple corners, where there just wasn't any room. Now right? And so the riders, like I just think to myself, okay, if there was grass there, would they be doing this? Are they doing it, trying to go 3 or 4 wide through a chicane because they know that there is the asphalt there? And honestly, is that a move you would make. Would you be at 18 years old, 16, 17 years old, if you're in the mix and you're trying to make a name for yourself, would you care about taking a guy's line or a girl's line and leaving him out in no man's land, thinking, all right, you're going to have to roll off or you're going to get a penalty? Like it to me, it becomes part of the race strategy. At Spa, when I raced there, you go into this stadium section and it's like you come into it where the grandstands start, and then you do like I can't remember, say like 100-degree right-hand turn, and then you start heading down the hill to another stadium. Those are just 3 public roads that come together to make a racetrack. And so you're actually going in that section and you're braking right into a wall of mountain. And so they have a white line on the edge of the road, the white line, normal white line that would be on a road that you would pedal your bicycle over. And they basically said, okay, here's the deal. If you cross that white line, there's going to be a penalty. If you do it a second, I can't remember the actual, what it was now. But it was like a time penalty if you did it a second time or a third time or whatever. And I thought to myself, that's safe. Like, how is that safe? So I understand what MotoGP is trying to do is they're basically saying, look, inside these lines that were painted, so you have the red and white, this and the racetrack, and anything that's green is off limits, and you've got to roll out of it and not gain an advantage. And I don't know, it's a weird thing. And in Moto3, those stewards were kept so busy because it was an absolute mess. But I'm jumping way in my head of myself with Moto3 at this point.
No, but I'm with you, Greg, because I just think that the track limits thing, as riders, we need the runoff. We want the runoff. We have to have it. And there might be times where you run off, but all these guys have had it drummed into them so hard that unless you see somebody that has really got some sort of significant advantage, like a real significant advantage, then just stop with all the warnings and all the crap. Because to me, I just don't see a rider, and maybe I'm giving the riders over there too much credit. Maybe there's something that I don't know about, but I just hate when racing gets thrown into the field of four walls that are watching the race, that have never ridden a motorcycle maybe, or that have never been in that situation. I haven't been in that situation where I've ever ridden with 18 guys in a Moto3 race and it had been so close. But there's so much going on and the decisions that are being made. So it's hard to say. Let's move on, Greg. Moto2. I think MotoGP was great. I'm going to do something a little bit different with Moto2. Before I go through the results, I want to go through it and just talk about like what I saw, because when you look at the not classified, Bo Ben Schneider and Simone Corsi, they were our first guys out. They got together. Bulaga, he broke. Remy Gardner took himself out. Navarro the same. But then you got Jorge Martin and Sam Lowes. They came together. Sam crashed. 4 laps later, whatever it was, Jorge Martin, who was having his best result so far on the Red Bull KTM, he crashes. And then you have Enea Bastianini and Xavi Vierge. They got together and hit each other. They crashed. Very innocent. Thomas Luthi was very lucky in that one. If you go back and watch, he actually center punched the back of Vierge's bike and didn't go down, thankful. But then you got Baldassari and Marquez. Out of the, 10 guys, 11 guys that didn't finish that race that all crashed, they were all multiple bike accidents. So we had a ton of non-scorers, big shakeup in the championship, obviously, with the likes of Marquez, Baldassari, and those guys not finishing. The win goes to Augusto Fernandez, his first win on the Flexbox HP40 team. Brad Binder was fast again. KTM has finally found something with that bike because, like I said, his teammate Jorge Martin was quick as well. Binder led the majority of that race, or most of it. Had some really bad front end chatter that he talked about in his post-race interview that has obviously been a major talking point. I don't know, Greg, if they really found something as much as maybe Assen didn't bring out some of it as bad as it was, but he said he was on the knife edge the whole time. Luca Marini, Thomas Luthi, Nagashima, Locatelli, Stefano Manzi, who started from dead last. We are always talking about how, he's been known to be a little bit of a aggressive takeout guy. He ends up 7th, best Grand Prix he's ever had. Marcel Schroeder, mystery there to me to see him so far back. Dominica Gurta on the second MV Agusta is 9th. Chassis, that is. Bezecchi, Di Gianantonio, Jake Dixon gets his first points. Tolovic, Joe Roberts. Joe even ran off the track, so he got his points too, as did his teammate Iker Lecuona, who just seems to be not himself compared to what it was last year. That could be the difference between what was he on a speed up last year, wasn't he, Greg? I think Iker Lecuona with speed up with Sam Lowes. So he's on the KTM now. Those guys are struggling. They finished 14th, 15th. Crazy race. One of the probably best Moto2 races I've seen in a long, long time. You had a train of 6 or 7 guys going for the lead. I think the guy, even though Augusto Fernandez, big story there, getting his first Grand Prix win, rode amazing, but you got to feel a little bit for Alex Marquez. A lot of people have been critical of him, probably including me over the years. But the kid really has put it together. Last 3 rounds, he wins. This one kind of looked like he sat back there, Greg, kind of doing what his brother does. He just kind of sat there watching, made his way to the front, got there, took the lead, and then he gets cleaned out by Baldassarri, who is either a win it or bin it this year anyways. What did you take from that race?
Pretty much what you took away. Alex lost the lead in the championship too, which stings. It's only 8 points to Luthi, and the way Luthi's been riding, which is, get out front and then fade kind of a thing. I don't know if I'm Alex and I'm long view that upset. I'll see how next weekend goes, but I thought that Baldassarri was kind of desperate, wasn't, and obviously he overrode the limits and he cleaned them both out. And I did find it very interesting that Marquez, after the crash, paused a moment to yell at Baldassarri while the motorcycle was still laying on top of Baldassarri. I thought that was, yeah. Did you notice that?
And I did. I saw that. Yeah.
But of course that's emotions. I mean, you're leading this championship and you get taken out. It's like, what are you going to do? There's so many great things when I look at this race, and I think to myself, the one thing that Augusto Fernandez talked about post-race was the fact that it was like a Moto3 race. It was so crazy and so hectic. And he thought to himself, he told us out loud, they thought to himself, this is great. Like, we're down to 4 riders at the end. But he said before that, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to pull this off? There's so many people, so many attacks that are coming. And I started laughing because I'm thinking to myself, yeah, here you and I are, right? You, a top-level racer, and me, a top-level club racer at one time in my life. I'll go for it because I won a couple championships at the wearer level. I'm not going to...
God, here we go.
Hello?
Here we go.
Oh, do I need to tell that? Do I need to tell the Turn 3 Laguna story, by the way?
No, we're not telling Laguna anymore.
Anyway. Can
never be told again.
Roger Hayden, you're listening. But anyway, no, the point is, here we are, ex-racers, going, wow, Moto3's nuts. How could you race in Moto3? And here you have Fernandez going, man, this is crazy. I can't race in this. Now, I get it. Bigger bikes, bigger speed, all that kind of stuff. But I thought it was very interesting. But, Jason, it also shows that Fernandez said that he thought, and Binder said this too, Brad Binder, who finished second on the KTM, and I'll get back to Brad in a second. He also thought to himself that, hey, something might happen up front. And I guess if you look at that, I think the something might happen up front has got to really lay on Baldassarri. I don't think it lays on Marquez. Marquez has been very much in control this season. And so I think they didn't say it out loud, but I'm thinking to myself, oh, you must be talking about Baldassarri, right? And that's where Baldassarri is now starting to position himself, where earlier on in the year, we were singing his praises, saying, unbelievable, new 100%. Baldassarri, he's winning races, blah, blah, blah. Now it's exactly what you said. It's win it or bin it Baldassarri. And so I think that makes, he's like the loose cannon. He's the guy with the grenade in his hand with the pin pulled going, do I let it go? Do I not let it go?
Right. And it's sad too, because the races that he was winning, he was showing a lot of patience. Then he would take the lead and he would go. The funny part about it was the pass that he made on Marquez. He had made that pass on a couple other guys prior, but Marquez's pace was a little bit more. So even with what he said, once I got to this position, I realized I'm going a little bit too slow, and he tried to speed up. Right. And so that's why you see the bike move. The rear of the bike just absolutely squats. It doesn't even look like it's an inch, but you can really see it. It just squats a little bit, and then it kind of like high sides him a little bit off the inside of the bike, loses the front. And it just took the weight off the front enough to where it just tucked the front underneath Marquez, and he's just sitting there, and it sucked for him. When you talk about another young guy who I really think is hopefully he finds it, but it's Remy Gardner. Like, gets pole position, incredibly fast all weekend, and it just looks like he's ready, but the maturity just isn't there. And the only reason I bring this up is it comes really funny to me that, his dad's a 500 Grand Prix world champion, who I would think has probably sat him down and said, listen, the beginning of these races are so hectic in this Moto2 class. It's very difficult to get away, just like Moto3, Greg. I counted 6 errors that he made in the first 3 laps. I counted 6. I went back and watched it. He made 6 errors in the first 3 laps that weren't just little ones. They were potential to clean himself and other people out. And just, lack of patience. You cannot win the race in 3 laps. And yeah, you can gain positions in the first 3 laps, providing that you do it in a way that doesn't break up the field and separate the field to make it to where you have to push harder in order to catch back up to the guys that you've lost time to because of something that you've done. And inadvertently, he ends up running off the track, getting back on, and then crashing a lap or 2 later, trying to make up that time. And you sit there and you watch some of these. We've been critical of other riders. I mean, you look at Sam Lowes this weekend. He actually was riding super well. Like, just looked like he had pace. He led the race, kind of fell back to 5th, 6th, showed the ability to pull himself back forward. Him and Jorge Martin got together through no real fault of Sam's. Just kind of had the bars knocked out from his hands, and he tipped over. It wasn't like the normal crash that somebody was over pushing. It just was 2 guys got together. But you got to hope that like somebody like Remy Gardner figures it out.
Well,
quicker than what Baldassari's figuring it out, because I think that Baldassari he could win he could have been well up in this championship, but just too many errors.
I have no problem with what Remy Gardner is doing to himself if he was learning from his mistakes.
Correct. 100%, Greg. Yep.
But the thing is, Remy Gardner's first GP was back in 2014. He did 3 races back then. He did 18 in 2015. He did 12 in 16, 17 in 17. He did 15 last year, and now he's 7 races into this. So it's not like Remy Gardner's coming into this thing and he's a class rookie. I mean, this is now season number 7. Not full season number 7. I understand that.
Yep. But he's been hurt and he's had some big accidents, hasn't he?
He has.
He had a motocross bike last year and stuff.
Yeah, and so this is the first year that we've seen Remy with all this speed. Like, I just like I said, I as a fan of the sport, who is, my opinion means nothing but my opinion, but I always like to give riders some breathing room to be able to make mistakes. And where that comes from is there was back in the club racing days, Jason, I witnessed the season when Josh Hayes was riding for Valvoline Suzuki, which is John Ulrich's Team Hammer. And there was a one season when Hayes just tossed it down the road over and over and over and over again. Like, he was naturally talented. He was naturally fast. He won a lot of races at the club level. He gets this ride and he was doing some things and he's just crashing a lot, like a couple of years into it. But then what happened is like, I recognized that Hayes needed that season to crash to figure out how not to crash the rest of his career, and that's what created championships for him and the amount of race wins that he has now and all that kind of stuff. I really do think that 1 year where he did throw it down on the ground quite a bit had an influence on the rest of his career. And so I translated that year into like, okay, maybe people need a year. Maybe people need 2 years, but it's how you take it. Do you learn from it? And I don't know if you ever had a year like that, because I don't ever remember you crashing a lot. I mean, when you crash, you go big or go home. Very rarely did I ever see you go like, hey, look, Jason, that's a little low side. He gets up, he runs to the bike now.
Yeah.
It was like, hey,
I had more of those.
Jason's down.
I begged for low sides.
Yeah, Jason's down. Here comes the helicopter. But anyway, But you know what I'm saying? Like, so that's where I kind of base some of my information off of. And with Remy, I kind of sit there and go, okay, listen, man, this mistake is done. This mistake is done. This mistake is done. Now what? And I just want to say to the kid, dude, and who am I to say, right? Like, I'm nobody, but
who are we to say?
But I want to just grab him by the shoulders and say, slow down just a little bit. Just chill.
Let the race play out a little bit. Like, you've got pace, you got pace. Let it play out. Like, let this thing happen. And, you brought up Josh Hayes. Greg, there's not a guy in the paddock. It would be a really fun question for us to go around and ask. But there's not a guy in the paddock that you couldn't sit there and go, did you ever have that year where you crashed a lot? And it's inevitably always at the beginning of your career where, I mean, Greg, I got on a road race bike. I didn't crash for 3 years when I started. Like, I never fell. Never, ever, ever fell. And then I went through a couple of years, and I was real lucky. My bad times didn't really start till I got a factory ride, sadly. But yeah, I mean, I if I crashed 3 times a year, that was a lot for me at one point, But the thing is that we've all had those years or those learning times. I just went through this with Alex Dumas because he crashed twice at VIR, and the kid never puts a wheel wrong. To see him crash twice, it's almost like, wait a minute, what's going on with the Earth right now? Is it falling off its axis because Alex crashed, And and then he tipped over at Buttonwillow a couple of weeks ago, even on his outlap, and it was like just not used to seeing that. But when you're learning, when you're young, you can have these little spats of tipping over, but you got to learn from them. And every great champion, like a Josh Hayes, like a Tony Elias or Cameron Beaubier, maybe even, would have to ask Cameron, but they've all gone through that little spat of like stupid little incidents, stupid little crashes, things that we can learn from, that we can put into our arsenal so that we can get better. When you've got a kid like Lorenzo Baldassarri, when you have a kid like Remy Gardner that are young, they're aggressive, but they've got the speed, they've got the intangibles. Now they've got to improve their racecraft and improve their minds and start to figure out, I got to be there at the end. I can't win these races at the beginning. I can't win. They're not throwing the checkered flag on the third lap. So maybe start to ride with a little less desperation in those opening laps, unless you know for sure you can do something.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right. So anything else you want to add about Moto2?
No, it's great. I think, what is it now? I think we got Luthi. Greg, you are the absolute stat guy. Great job there with the Remy thing, by the way, because but I mean, I think when you look at the World Championship right now, you got Luthi leading. It's just 6 points back as Marquez.
Not 8, 6,
but I mean, you sit there and you look at Baldassarri, Greg. What's he won? 3 Grand Prix this year?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's won 3. He's 88 points right now. So he's, what is he? 12, 17, he's 29 points out of the lead. He's 5th in points, and he's had all these DNFs. And again, I feel bad for Marquez. It seemed like that was his race again to possibly win, or at least a podium that would have increased his championship. And just like that, he's 6 points behind. Really, in the other 2 championships, and I know you're going to bring up Moto3 now, we've got some really good championship battles.
Just to put a button on what you were talking about for Baldassarri.
Yeah.
Win, no finish. Win, 4th place, no finish. So it's it's about as close to win it or bin it as you can possibly get. So so there you go, 88 points, and 75 of those have come from wins.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, then
that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. All right, so
but isn't there somebody on the team that'll just sit him down and go, listen, isn't there a point? Like, you don't ever want to take somebody's edge away. You don't ever want to try to change somebody's mind that much, but there is a point where you have to sit somebody down and go, look, here's the deal. I mean, just look at Marc Marquez. Look what he does.
Yeah.
Like, it just cracks me up. The guy was 4th. When was the last time I couldn't even tell you last time I didn't see the kid on the front row, but he's 4th in qualifying, not even talked about hardly, but it's like, he doesn't care. He's going to be there Sunday. No matter what, there's going to be that he is going to be there every single week.
He even came out in the press before, Jay, and said, this is Yamaha's race to lose. He knew the writing was on the wall. But
he's going to push him the whole way, isn't he?
I'll give you this last story. Yeah. In 1996, a motorcycle racer named Jamie Hacking was also riding for that Valvoline Suzuki team. And he was coming off of his novice year. Okay, yellow plate year, and it was his first year expert. And one of the things that Jamie would do, like, this is the way I explain it. It wasn't like this exactly, but this is the way I explain it to people. It was like Jamie would go out and just blister every single corner of every track, because he was going to almost all new tracks at the time. So he'd like run off in this corner, run off in that corner, and then he would like back it down. You get what I'm, you know how most of us go to a track and we get a little quicker and a little quicker, and then we maybe run off. Jamie would do it backwards, and he was ungodly fast, but he would put it in the weeds more times. And sometimes he would crash, and sometimes he would just run through the weeds. And it was about halfway through that season, as I remember it correctly. And obviously it's been a long time, but halfway through that season, and someone, I don't know if it was John Ulrich or someone on that team, sat down with Jamie and just said, back it down a tenth, just slow it down a little bit. And Jamie listened. And Jay, he nearly ran the table for the rest of the season at those WERA Nationals, because we were going to different tracks around the country. And it was like, whoa. And then the next year he signed with Robert Nutt and the Kinko's Kawasaki team, went to Phoenix and put the thing on pole in 600 Super Sport, and a very competitive. So, it's that, are you teachable? And you know it, and I know it too. Is Lorenzo Baldassarri, does he have someone in his camp that's saying, hey, slow down a bit, and will he listen is the question. So I hope so, because he can make for some great racing. And that was just a mistake. It wasn't intentional, I don't think. It was just a mistake. Obviously, you never want to take yourself out. And he was, it's a bummer that he crashed Marquez out. But in Moto2, now we have a 6-point championship, and I'm loving that. All right, on to Moto3.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple talking points I want to bring up in Moto3 here, but let me go through the results, because once again in Moto3, the results have nothing to do with how this race ended up. But Tony Arbolino gets his second win of the season. So he's our first double race winner of the year over Lorenzo Della Porta by 0.045 of a second, as you would expect. Jakob Kornfeld finished third. We'll talk more about that. Gabriel Rodrigo, John McPhee in fifth. Agora, that's my boy. I never met him, but he's my boy because his sister race here in the States. He was in sixth. Marcos Ramirez in seventh. Antonelli in eighth. Foggia in ninth. Alonso Lopez in 10th. Romano Fenati in 11th. Really? Aaron Canet in 12th. Really? Kazuki Masaki.
3 seconds back.
Right? 3 seconds back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kazuki Masaki, 3 seconds back in 13th. And Philip, is it Salak?
Solak.
Oh, Solak, yeah. In 14th, 3 seconds back. Then finally, it was Sergio Garcia in 15th. Jan Anju, actually, the rookie sensation race winner from last year, won the last race coming from Red Bull Rookies Cup, finally finishes a race, and he's in 16th. But a couple big non-finishers, Darren Binder, Kaito Toba, another one, Suzuki out of this one, Arenas, Masia, but it looked like his bike stopped working, so not really his fault.
Yeah, his bike broke. Yeah.
All right, so those are the results for Moto3. Jason, you just mentioned it. Top 14 all covered by 3.7 seconds. There was a bit of a break at the end between Della Porta and Arbolino on that one, 1.5. That was probably, I'd have to go
back to Kornfeld.
Yeah, back to Kornfeld. So, all right, couple talking points. Number one, lack of attrition, Jason, at the beginning of this race. Right? Compared to what we saw last time. Not too bad, was it, at the beginning of this race?
Pretty good. A lot of slicing and dicing, though. That's the thing of it. When you watch Fenati, you talked about it. You stopped when you said his name. He ends up 11th. But the reality of it is the guy got all the way up to the lead, started stretching them apart. And then it's like kind of everybody learns, gets back onto his pace, gets shuffled back to 11th. And really, you're only an incident away from being shuffled, from second place back to 6th or 8th or 10th or whatever it is. The one guy that I will talk about in this race that did a lot of things to set off a lot of commotion was Darren Binder. He's another one that's a little bit like Remy Gardner to me. Darren Binder's a big kid, but if you start looking at odds, it's 6-1 odds he's going to crash every race because he's just maybe higher because you just don't feel like he's going to finish, and he didn't. He crashed himself out. He was making a lot of passes in the chicane that were separating the fields, causing a lot of riders to go a lot of different directions. Aggressive, yeah, love the aggression, but there's controlled aggression, and he just doesn't have it, and that's why he's not finishing races. Della Porta, when he took the lead, Greg, you said it, he created a gap, and Arbolino was able to run him down. He is Fenati's teammate, is Arbolino, on the VNE Snipers team, and Romano, he kind of went backwards. He got kind of shoved off the track with 5 or 6 to go. Never could make that up. Point leader Aaron Canet, it's another guy. But if you watch him this year, Greg, we've heard him in a lot of incidents in the last 2 years. He keeps his nose clean. He's not doing stupid stuff. Yeah, he finished 12th, and that sucks. He was 3 seconds off of winning. There was a lot of guys between him, but he's not doing the dumb stuff that's going to take him out of the championship points lead. And again, 12th isn't nothing to write home about, but that's 4 points in the bank. Still leading the championship, I believe.
He is by 7. By 7.
By 7, and another round that he can put under his belt. And when you look at the non-finishers, Raul Fernandez is another top kid, rookie this year, going fast. But you've got to finish these races, and if you can keep yourself out of trouble in Moto3, I think that's just your first order of business. Did you actually see where Kornfeld ran off?
Yeah,
or where he cut the track?
Yeah. Because they replayed it like 50 times at the end.
Okay,
but let's go. Let's go back. All right, let's go back for anybody who didn't see the race.
Finishes third, right?
So Jakob Kornfeld was leading the race. He was leading the race with 4 laps to go. He got a message on his dashboard and on the pit board saying that he had the long lap penalty. Long lap means it's something that MotoGP worked on this year. They basically have a section of the track where they're going to take you on a long bit of pavement, like. It'll go past the corner, and it's supposed to add a few seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. It's really hard to determine. And that's a penalty for whatever. Like they can actually just say, okay, go take a long lap penalty because you did A, B, C, or D. So they knew that if you exceeded track limits, that there was the possibility after warnings and this and that. So the one that got him was what? The chicane? When he got bumped out wide. I mean, he had nowhere to go. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Is like, if that was grass, that dude would have been.
Totally agree with you.
And so to me, it's like, is it that stupid, rule that we have in the US, it's like whatever, the zero tolerance policies, which, why would there ever be a zero tolerance policy? We're human beings. There's always got to be something that factors into something that might sway a decision, but no zero tolerance. So that's what it looked like to me. Cut the track. I'm like, cut the track. They were going through that tight section, 5 wide? There was
5 abreast.
Right? There was no more room.
100%.
And I was like, okay.
100%.
Now, the argument is that Kornfeld did not roll off the throttle and lose a position, but on a Moto3 bike, that has got to be a penalty plus, because if you, in that section where you're accelerating, right out of that corner, if you rolled off the throttle, lose a position in that tight group, he would probably lost 10 spots. Wouldn't you think?
It's Romano Fenati. Fenati was running 3rd or 4th when that whole incident happened with Binder that nobody talked about. To me, that was much worse than what you saw. And I agree with you 100% on this, Greg, because at the end of the day, Kornfeld, he basically got pushed off. He looked over to the right. He saw where he kind of got himself back into the position he was in. There was no advantage gained. They sit there and they say that they look at the lap times and they look at the last sector, and that's what they look. So what really are you looking at? If a guy gains a 10th but didn't gain a position, if the guy gains 3/10, I don't care what it is, but didn't gain a position because he's got people in front of him and people behind him and whatever, however you want to do it. Where is it that you draw the line and go, okay, that wasn't a racing incident, something he got pushed off the track. It's not like he was going, I'm going to just cut right here and gain that 0.3 of a second. Right. Like, come on. Like, to me, it's just so ridiculous. And that also makes me feel like Dorna's got a little bit of a gag order on these guys, because they get these penalties and they kind of go like, oh, it's still great, I'm on the podium. And that's how you've got to be. You've got to be like happy that you're on the podium. I just feel like I feel like Kornfeld got kind of screwed on this one. I think that he could have won that race. He was extremely fast. Did a really fast last lap. And if you watch, Craig, how he had to get back on the track, it was almost more dangerous because there was a gaggle of guys going for 4th place. I mean, let's see. You got Gabriel Rodrigo at 2.1 seconds off the lead and all the way back to Salek, who was 3.7. So you're looking at 10, 12 guys that were all within a second and a half of each other. And Kornfeld pulled right back out in front of those guys, like literally from the penalty loop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, to me, Dorna just made the situation worse in that particular case.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything with that penalty loop yet, but it really concerns me. I mean, it looked like at that particular corner there was enough runoff. If someone was taking that penalty loop, if they crashed, they would have just stopped in the gravel. But, I wonder if that's going to be the case all the time. And we know that freak things happen. You just never know. And I just think it puts them in a very dangerous position. But I do have to say, though, that I was really impressed with the decision-making of Kornfeld. Sometimes I get wrapped up in what the commentators are saying, in their stuff. And they're like, oh, why is he not coming in or whatever? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I hope that he's doing what he thinks is best. That obviously he sees it. It's on the dash. It said penalty on his board. And post-race, Jakob said, look, I was trying to put as much distance as I could between myself and the group in 3rd place. And obviously it paid off because he did the penalty loop and he came in hotter than a firecracker too. Like, I think for me, I would have been like, wow, how much, I'm a club racer, right? Like a track day guy. How much dirt is on this? Like, can I go full lean angle here? How many people have actually been on this? He didn't care. Kornfeld just went, he got on the brakes. The bike was squirming. He chucked it into the corner. He rode around and he came out and no one had anything for him. And if
he did a good job, didn't he?
He did a really good job. And obviously it was something he thought about. And you're right, though, Jay. I think had I been in that same position, I probably would have gone to my team and said, you need to go and bitch about this right now. I was forced off the track. Like, what do you want from me? But,
Exactly. But even in his post-race interview, he was just very happy. Like, I finished 3rd. It's great to be on the podium. I mean, just to be on the podium in a Moto3 race is gnarly. And he's been around for a while, right? So
yeah, 2009.
I'm with you, Greg. I'm with you. I would have been like, hey, I'm pissed off. Like, I'm not happy. I finished 3rd. Okay, I'm happy I finished 3rd. But I'm pissed off in the same breath, and something's got to be done because, exceeding these track limits. I mean, think about all the times you see guys, jumping the curb at Sonoma or running into the dirt at Daytona, coming out of the chicane, wherever the case is. It's like you're pushing the limits. And when you've got, like you said, when you have 5 riders, Greg, going for a certain spot, somebody might get pushed off. You can't penalize them every time they do that. And they get warnings. I get it. You get warnings if they see that you've done it a lot. But the other thing too, you got to think about with this whole talk is, like, how hard can it be to be race control and see every single incident of every single rider for every single lap?
It's so funny you say that because I was at the house, okay, and I'm going to myself, wait a second, race control, the poor race control. That was Moto3. In the order they run them, it goes Moto3, Moto2, and MotoGP. Those people must have been so worn out and been like, man, we still have to go Moto2 and MotoGP. Like, I need to go home and take a nap because that was a busy
bring in a new fleet of people.
Yeah. Overall, though, I think they did a really good job with policing what they had to police. I'm sure some people were upset about it. I'm sure some people thought that, other people deserve to be whatever. I don't know any of that stuff, but I thought they did a good job with the rules we had in place. I don't necessarily agree with them. I think they need to be looked at in terms of, track limits and all that kind of stuff. However, it's, clear what the penalties are going to be if you exceed track limits, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't like it was all of a sudden a decision that was made later on. They knew going in. So fair play to them. And by the way, this is probably an entire podcast, what I'm about to say. But what I want you to think about is this. There are people online who will complain about, I don't know, MotoAmerica's racing right now, which I have no idea how they possibly could, right? And, the racing back in the day between Spies and Mladen was better racing, whatever. I invite you to think about this. You're full of shit. If you think that you like racing, okay?
So there.
Well, think about it, Jay. If you go, I just love racing. I love racing, and that's what I want to see. Yep. I want to see close racing. You're lying because you don't like just good racing. You like to see the person you root for go race. You like to see a hero, Ben Spies, and a villain, Matt Mladen, go after it.
Yep.
How many races that were close, whatever, because if you like close racing, then Moto3 would be, hands down, without question, the number 1 motorsport in the world.
No question.
But yet Formula One drags in 300,000 people to a race in Canada, but yet the racing up is so boring, right?
Oh, God, it's so nauseating. It's the worst. I don't even understand it, but you're exactly right. This could be a whole nother podcast, but your point's so well taken. If you're not watching Moto3 and you call yourself a race fan, I don't know. That's got to be questioned. So
I'm just saying, check yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah, take a hard look in the mirror.
At the door.
That's all I'm saying, because it is absolutely nuts. Absolutely love Moto3.
I agree with you, G-Dub, 1,000%. Now, we got Sachsenring coming up next week.
We do.
And what I want people to know about this podcast, okay, is that my counterpart in this podcast busts his ass. And his little line on our rundown that he's read here that I'm going to read, okay? This is a G-Dub thing, which just cracks me up because you are so right. Marquez is going for 10 wins. In all classes, Marquez won since 2010 at Sachsenring. Now, Greg is so kind to put, but Coda had an issue, just saying, okay? Greg, you do your homework so well, and you are 100% right. He's got 160 points to Dovi's 116. So what are you saying here about old Marquez and Oschersleben at Sachsenring? This different track, same country, just different track. I raced Oschersleben, Sachsenring. I mean, are you questioning him?
No. Well, yes. Well, kind of. Okay, this was more of a note because if you go back and listen to the podcast from Coda, I was like, Marc Marquez. He's gonna win it all. No big deal. Let's talk about second place. Let's talk about second.
I think most of us were on your side on that one,
right? And as we go into Sachsenring, Coda's what Coda was half of that. Sachsenring's even worse. So all I'm saying is that there's a lot of left-handers, which we know Mark loves. He's a dirt track guy. He loves those left-hand corners, but he actually is a human being and can make a mistake. So the question now becomes, is Sachsenring Coda Part 2? Where how is Mark going to respond? Because post-race of Coda, he did say, well, listen, there was a lot of pressure on me because everybody's expecting me to win. But now we're singing the exact same song, maybe times 2, about Sachsenring. And we know that there are some people that can go really fast around this racetrack. Nobody has proven themselves as fast as Marquez in the past, but he also is not equipped with a Honda that is a perfect race machine. Not as, I think, yes, faster motor than 2018, but I don't think the chassis was as good. And I think Takahaka Nakagami is really proving that how good that 2018 bike really was. So that's all that was.
Yeah. It's weird too, because you have to wonder a little bit, because it was COTA and because since the first time we went there, Marquez dominated it. He dominated it. But Sachsenring's been around a little bit longer. I wonder if that's the same amount of hype. Yeah. I mean, look, the guy's won 10 years in a row there. It's insane. That kind of stat to me is just crazy. Mm. I just feel like
9 years, 9 years in a row going for 10.
9 years going into this year, it would be 10. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is that the mistake he made at COTA was simply that it was a mistake. But when you hear them talking all the time right now, I mean, those championship checks must be big, because that's all he talks about now. Is like, I you know what I'm saying? Like I'm pushing, but at the end of the day, I need to finish in front of this guy and this guy. I honestly think the kid gets down before the start of each weekend and goes, okay, Dovi's 44 points behind me now, and Rins is if I beat these guys, I got a 2-race lead. If I beat these two guys, I got a 2-race lead. Even in his interview, he goes, Maverick win, but he only gains 5 points on me, and he's 50 points back plus going into the weekend. He's not Vinales isn't even on his to-do list right now. It's he wants to win races, but he's going to continue to beat the guys that are closest to him in the championship. In the past, it always seems like Sachsenring has been that track that's been really good for him. So yeah, I don't know if I could ever. I agree with everything you say in this piece here. I just think that he will do whatever he can to keep it upright and just do the best. But yeah, he's going to be there. He's going to be there every weekend trying to win.
He's racing the leaderboard now, isn't he, Jay? That's all he's doing. He's racing the leaderboard. So all he's got to do is just get the piece of paper that says, here's the points tally. And he goes, great, I got to beat that guy. Let's go out and do that.
Yep.
And so the championship bonus or championship statistics or whatever Mark is racing for have more of an appeal than those win bonuses at the moment. But because he knows he's still going to go to some racetracks and he's going to roll the thing off the truck and it's going to be absolute butter. And he's going to go just work everyone else. So why not just go, okay, I think for me, I can win here, I can win here, I can win here. This one, we'll see. We'll see when we get there. So I know that in in the Moto2 side of things, that Binder had said that KTM is coming up, with something brand new by Brno. Like they're going to have a new, whatever the next generation is. And we know that MotoGP, usually the Japanese manufacturers, I'm not really sure about the Italians, but the the Hondas and the Yamahas and so on have a schedule set usually where they say, okay, here's a new bit that's coming out. Here's the next evolution of chassis. Here's the next, whatever. So I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be for Honda, but if they get this perceived front end issue of that Honda sorted out, and maybe Marquez knows it's coming, then all of a sudden he's super calm. Going,
yep, and yeah, exactly. It's like I agree with you. I just think he's at this point he's just feeling so comfortable. When they get that bike even better for him, they're all in a lot of trouble right now. That championship is, for all intents and purposes, without we don't want to see him get injured, obviously, but it's pretty ball over.
Who do you think pole position for MotoGP other than Marquez? Who would you put on pole if Marquez doesn't get it?
Well, I think you got to go with Quartararo right now. He's proven that pressure doesn't bother him in qualifying specifically. I can't really remember how the Ducatis did around there last year. For some reason, I've just kind of drawn a little bit of a blank on last year's race, and usually I'm pretty good about that, but probably hit my head on the ground too many times, Greg, and I can't really remember. Right? But I think that for me, when I look at things, this Quartararo kid's pretty impressive right now. This track seems like it's a track where you spend a lot of time on the edge of the tire. Yamaha's always kind of been known for corner speed and rolling through. It looks like maybe some of their grip issues maybe have gotten handled in their acceleration. I just don't know, but you got to think that right now it would sit itself well to maybe see Vinales and Quartararo doing pretty well again. So Ducatis will be there because it's got some big uphills and things where the horsepower of that bike, I think the front straightaway is all uphill pretty much. It flattens out, but the Ducati will be strong as well. But
the podium last year was Marquez by 2.1 over Rossi and Vinales.
Yeah,
then Danilo Petrucci was the first Ducati. Then you had Bautista who was on the Ducati. Then you had Lorenzo and Dovizioso. So you're talking last year, it was Petrucci who finished 3.3 back, but your championship contender was 7.9 back. So,
yeah, that's pretty. It'll be interesting to see how that whole thing works itself out. It'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and we got kind of a busy weekend this weekend, don't we? Because we got Donington as well.
Yeah, World Superbike Donnington Park is coming up, so they're back in action before they come right back to the States. So I think one of the biggest things that I caught, Jason, is that Michael Vandermark says he wants to come back, but Taryn McKenzie is in waiting. Taryn from BSB races a Yamaha. So, I mean, what do you think about Vander? I thought for sure he's going to be out at Donington, but now he's saying, well, I'm going to give it a go. He won both races there last year, so I understand the desire to try to come back, but what do you think? Is it worth it for him at this point?
Doesn't this make you just kind of laugh when you read about these guys making $180 million basketball contracts and this and that? I get it. And I'm opening up a whole other can of worms, but guys, when they get injured, they'll sit out and the trainers sit them out and they do that. And they like the team has invested so much money in them that they're like, the best horses in the world that they're not going to let run until they're 100%. But you get a guy who, I don't know if I've seen that violent of a superbike crash in a long time. Is that one at Misano for Vandermark?
Mm-hmm.
What was it? 2 weeks? It's going to be 2 weeks to the day that he jumps back on a bike or something in that realm.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
And he's got a broken wrist. He's had surgery, and he's like, nope, I'm third in the points. I need to try to defend that. And these guys generally don't make any money on the race weekends as far as purse and things go unless they finish top 3. And you got to think that a guy with a freshly broken wrist after 2 weeks might not finish top 3. There's 2 things motivating him. Number 1, he's third in the championship. Number 2, he doubled here last year. He did a double win at Donington. So there's obviously something about that place that he really likes. But the fact that Vandermark is coming back after 2 weeks just makes me sit on the couch sometimes and go like, man, I'm seeing these guys sign all these big money and they deserve it because they bring in the fans and they do all this. I have no problem with guys making their money. But motorcycle racers just seem like they're pretty much anybody that races anything, cars, bikes, whatever, they just seem like a different breed where they can just get on a bike even not feeling great, but I'm going to figure out a way to go get points so I can keep third in the championship.
No, I agree with you, except I will make this counterpoint just to play devil's advocate. When you look at a stick and ball sport, like basketball, they have access to it anytime they want. You even if you play baseball, I mean, you can go to, especially if you're a pro ball player, you can find a place to throw a ball, even if it's to a pitchback. Remember that thing, right? The pitchback.
Yeah. Sure.
Or go to a batting cage. And I think that for us, motorcycle racing fans or former racers or track day people, I think the passion to do it and keep going partly is because we get to do it so infrequently. MotoGP is the best, 19 races a year. MotoAmerica, we have 10, race weekends. I think World Superbike's 13 or 16. I'd have to look at the calendar. I don't know. Yep. I've thought about that quite a bit. And I don't think, as 13 rounds for World Superbike. I think, as Jay, it's never really about the money because it's kind of relative, isn't it? You look across there's nobody anymore in World Superbike who's making a couple $1 million a year. So I think the money is relative to the paddock as much as it is in our paddock, as much as a basketball contract for the most part is relative to other people. I think, though, that when you see a rider a la Miguel Duhamel, for instance, on crutches, get on the motorcycle and go win the Daytona 200, it's
and the 600 race.
It's pretty incredible. Same week. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Broken femur, couldn't walk. I mean,
yeah, but he sure has
been going on. He's been going on for years.
You can cash a check though with a broken leg, can't you? You know what I mean?
You sure can. And at Daytona, he looked at Daytona as like, okay, it's really not that physical. Knew he had a great bike, knew he had a great team, but the mental aspect of being able to think how many of you track day riders get out there and you tip off and might take you 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 track days to kind of figure your way back around. I mean, Miguel was coming from basically broken femur, couldn't even walk there at Daytona, first race of the year, and does the double. But I think that him doing that is great. You always love to see a kid like Taryn McKenzie get a shot if he does get a shot. We remember Cameron going over there at this very race 3 years ago, probably now, Greg, when he got to sub for Alex Lowe's there. So nice to see young guys. I was a little bit puzzled because I thought that at the beginning of the year that I read that Paul Bird Motorsports with Redding and Josh Brooks were probably going to be doing this race as well. They're not doing it. Kind of makes me question or wonder why they're not doing it. Other than I know that they're both top 2 or top 3 in the championship over there after the weekend at Knock Hill. So
what do they race? Do they race Pirellis or Dunlops over there?
They do. They race Pirellis.
So they're already in the wheelhouse. Maybe they knew lap times or something.
It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to say.
And it could be what you said. It could be the fact that they're locked in the championship and they don't want to take the risk.
Yep. So when you look at it, when you look at some of that stuff, the World Superbike will be great this weekend. I'm hoping the weather will be nice. It is England after all, in the middle of the country. But what do we got? A 16-point championship now, Greg, between Bautista and Johnny Ray. So that championship, I mean, really, these next 2 weekends could get really exciting because they go on a summer break after this. And then they got the Suzuka 8-hour where some of these guys are going to have been gone testing. And it'll be really, what would be interesting to me is to see if Ray does get closer or he takes the championship lead, how much do they want to risk him going to the 8-hour at that point? The 8 hours, a lot of risk there. I'd say out of the 50 bikes, 40 bikes that are there qualifying, you're going to get about 15 or 20 of them that have 15 probably quality bikes with great riders. And the others are a huge risk for Johnny Ray to be out there riding around for, hour stints. I'm sure he's still going to do the 8-hour. I'm just saying, I wonder if that changes Kawasaki's philosophies at all, if he trims that lead down or even has the lead by the time they leave Laguna. So it'll be interesting. Jack Kennedy, though. Jack Kennedy has won 600 Supersport in BSB last year and is leading it this year. He is going to do the World Supersport race alongside his teammates. So I'm heard a lot of great things about Jack Kennedy. And how fast he is. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in World Supersport.
Brad Jones doing it as well. They have wild cards in the World Supersport 300 as well. So it's good to see some wild cards participating over there, as much as when we come to WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, we got one of our own in World Superbike, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. All right, Jay, let's move on from World Superbike preview because it's getting kind of late in this podcast. I have no idea. I've been looking. An hour and 22 minutes. Very good.
Nah, we're doing good. We got Marvin Musquin won this weekend. Greg went 1-2 at Southwick. I don't know if you watched it. That track just looked stupid hard, like unbelievable. These guys are so gnarly to me, the motocross guys, but Musquin goes 1-2. How about this? Your boy, Zach Osborne, gets his first 450 first 50 moto win of his career. He wins the second moto going away. Look, just amazing. Got a good start. He ends up 3-1 for finishing second overall. Tomac goes 2-3. Webb and then Jason Anderson rounded out the top 5.
And Jason, in the championship, Musquin he got 5 points on Tomac and sits second. Now, Tomac sits on 257. Musquin's got 231. And we have 6 rounds left in this championship. All I'm saying is, here comes Musquin. Watch out, Tomac. Here he comes.
And Tomac made an effort to try to get up to Musquin in the second moto and couldn't quite get there. So it just looked, it didn't look as hot as it was in Florida, but the track, it was just so gnarly and just crazy hard. In the 250s, Greg, Adam Cianciarulo goes 1-2 to get his 4th overall out of 5 of this year, with Dylan Ferrandis second going 3-1. Ferrandis definitely looks like the guy, if he gets starts, he'll be Cianciarulo's hardest competitor. Although Justin Cooper, who goes 2-3, I know they're all close in the championship. And then RJ Hampshire, Shane McElrath rounded out the top 5 points there. G-Dub, I'm sure you already have them because I know
269 for Adam and 246 for Cooper. So you're looking at 23 points right now. So that's almost a race win in Cianciarulo's back pocket. But you still have Redbud coming up this week. You have Spring Creek. You have Washougal, which can be wet and nasty. Unadilla, Budds Creek. So there's still a lot of racing, and with 6 rounds left, that means 12 actual motos. So Cianciarulo's got a lot of time. Yeah, a lot of time. He's got to keep it clean, keep the pressure on, and stay healthy.
Well, American Flat Track this week, Greg, was in Lima, Ohio. Famous pea gravel track, as they like to say.
Oh, yeah.
And our boy Jared Meese. Jared Meese goes on and wins ahead of Jeffrey Carver. Henry Wiles was 3rd, Brandon Price 4th, and Bronson Bauman 5th. It looked like the first three guys had kind of ran away. It looked like it was probably a pretty good race. I didn't get to catch it. I was actually at Willow Springs all weekend, so I didn't get to actually watch that race. Did you get to see any of it?
Yeah, it was a good race. It was a good race. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It was better than some of the other ones that we've got to witness a little bit this year.
Well, if you're a Jared Mees fan, it is.
Yeah, of course,
but
right?
Jared, by the way, he pulled a good move on social media. A fan came up to him with a T-shirt that said "Anyone but Mees," and he signed it and took a picture with the woman. It was awesome. I was like, "Hey, I remember those Matt Mladen T-shirts that our fans rolled out with." You know what I mean? In the AFT singles presented by Russ Brown Motorcycle and Attorneys, Shanna Texter won another one. So Texter on her KTM over Bromley. Yep. And let's see. And we have to mention that in the AFT Production Twins, which is a series that doesn't run all the time. It just depends on that. It was, is it Chad Coase, I think?
Yep.
Is how you pronounce that. Corey Texter.
Yep.
Yeah. And then James Rispoli, our boy Rispoli, who's a former, well, I guess he's always a two-time national champ in road racing here in the United States. He was able to get his podium, and he was the only Harley Davidson in the field in that race. So good job.
Pretty wild. Good to see him. He's been dying to get himself back, up on a podium somewhere. I know James is chomping at the bit to get back into the MotoAmerica Championship. But right now he's just holding out, just doing the dirt track for now. So, anyways. So hopefully we'll get to see him back.
In BSB, it was in race 2. It was Scott Redding back on top at Knock Hill. Jason, did you get to see any of that race action or hear anything about it?
Yeah, well, no, I didn't. I know that Danny Buchan won the first day, and that kid's been around for a lot of years. Very, very talented. He won the first day in what looked like kind of mixed conditions. So it was really cool to see again a new winner, and that was this week. That was Danny Buchan. So, but Redding, I think, doing what. Again, you go back to the old home track advantage. Everybody made a big deal about, he's not going to get used to the British tracks and stuff. I just never really think that a guy at that level, that's at Scott Redding's level, there's such thing as a home track advantage. And he rocked into Knock Hill, having never seen the place. I think probably arguably the hardest place to maybe learn, they say, because it's so bumpy and the weather's so bad most of the time.
But
48-second lap times, and he wins.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So did you see his post-race press conference at all?
I didn't.
So what he talked about was how that race unfolded, because they actually, it was kind of like a wet, dry race and blah, blah, blah. And he said, look, going into race 2, I still didn't know the track that well. So I sat behind this rider and I watched, and then I went out to the lead and said, I made a mistake. So let me sit back and learn a little bit more. And so it was exactly that. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, when we used to go to Pikes Peak International Raceway, those lap times for Superbikes were, I think, 52 or something, 55 seconds. Was that you get a lot of time or get a lot of laps to figure a track out. So if you did have a question about a track like Knock Hill, a 48-second lap time, you're going to get a lot of opportunities to go round and around. It's not like you're going to Road America where they're 2 minutes and 20-second laps. So it's interesting post-race press from the former MotoGP rider and how he ended up winning race 2. And obviously they're locked in that battle. In GNCC, Caleb Russell took another close win over Stuart Baylor at Snowshoe. Congratulations to Caleb. All right, Jay, race calendar time. Go out and watch racing, people. This weekend, MotoGP is obviously in Sachsenring, Germany. That promises to be a good one. World Superbike in Donnington Park if you're in the UK. Pro Moto is in Michigan at the famed Red Bud. GNCC is home, meaning where the owners of that series are based in Morgantown, West Virginia, and they're racing just north of Morgantown, West Virginia at the high voltage event. And if you're in Sweden, Jason, I don't know if you have plans to go to Sweden this weekend, but World Speedway is going on. So that'll do it for our podcast. If you're listening to us in the United States or you're someone outside of the U.S., maybe military that's stationed around, we want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July. You got any plans for Thursday?
No, Greg, I'm flying up to Washington. I did want to pass on a sad note this week, Greg. We lost a guy that very underrated rider, very underrated in the sense that he was incredible on two wheels. But Carlin Dunn crashed at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb this weekend and lost his life. He was a 4-time winner there. I've really gotten to know Carlin well over the last 3 or 4 years. Not far from me, Santa Barbara guy. The whole area around here is rocked pretty hard by it when none of us can really believe it. I saw him at the track quite a bit, getting his Ducati up to speed and ready. He was very passionate about Pikes Peak and the event itself. So we're all thinking about, Carlin and his family and everybody involved in a race that was run by Rennie Skaysbrook, who's another one of our very, very close friends. I know he's felt pretty bad about it, but we're all thinking about Carlin at this time, and everybody have a great week and an unbelievable July 4th.